What advice could you give to a feminist woman coming into the field of psychology today? So what would you say to one of your students who was asking you, hey, you know, I want to go to graduate school in psychology?
I would say, tell me the problem or the behavior that you're most interested in, and I'll tell you if psychology is where you ought to be.
Okay, okay.
The women in my lab are interested in women's health. And I suggest to them that they continue getting a PhD. A psychology PhD is a very powerful and influential degree, and it will serve them well in that sense. But the models, the theoretical models, and the training and intervention models in psychology are conservative and in many ways misguided. And so I advise them all to get a degree in another field as well. And so all of my students are getting degrees in public health along with a PhD in psychology, and it gives them more opportunities in the job market. They'll never ever have problems. It means that they can work in more settings, a variety of kinds of settings. I mean, they can run a women's health program for a state Department of Health with the MPH. Or they can be psychology professors if they like with a PhD, but they will be exposed to other ways of thinking and to more community and larger social, political, causal models, as well as more community participatory action intervention models instead of simply individualistic ones. So I tend to tell people to get other kinds of training in addition to their psychology training, to be sure that they have a more well-rounded view of human behavior. There's an old metaphor that Vince Navarro used many, many years ago to try to describe the difference between psychology and public health and the other fields. And he said, you and I we're standing on the banks of a Russian river, watching people go by. You heard us. Watching people go by, drowning in the river. And psychology's perspective, psychology's approach is to pull those people out of the river and try to find out why some of them are bad swimmers, and try to teach them to be better swimmers, and understand the psychological factors that lead them to be bad swimmers. And public health's approach is to go up the river and grab the guy who's thrown them all in there. And those are very, very different ways of thinking about the problems of women and the problems of minorities and the issue of health disparities. Psychology's approach is always to do what has been referred to as downstream work, downstream theorizing and downstream intervening. And other disciplines are much more upstream theorizing and upstream interventions. And so my best advice to anyone, feminist or non-feminist, entering psychology is that if you want to make more of a difference in the world, if you want to be more of a positive factor in your community and in our nation and in our science as well, it's important to make sure that you add some upstream education to your downstream education in psychology so that you understand a wider variety of ways of conceptualizing problems and, most importantly, a wider range of ways of intervening to make things different.